Okay, 10 of you people in this audience were lucky enough to get one of these little cards that the fabulous Darl Sparks was handing out. Can I see those 10 people in the crowd? Raise your hands. Okay, great. Do not lose this ticket. Because thanks to our good friends and colleagues at Get TV, you will be receiving a lovely gift bag at the intermission, and I've seen what's in it, and you're in luck, because my all-time favorite movie, the Blu-ray of my all-time favorite movie, is in that gift bag, along with some other goodies. So congratulations, because it is one of the films that you can see on Get TV. And that movie, not to keep you in suspense, is Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham in A Lonely Place. That is my favorite movie of all time, and you'll get the brand new Blu-ray from Criterion in that gift bag. Don't lose the card. Okay, and the reason tonight we're giving that little promo for Get TV is because both of the movies that we are showing tonight are Columbia Pictures, which is now owned by Sony, and I am happy to say that there is no company in the world that shows more respect and care for their film archive than Sony. And there's a man who's in charge of that archive. His name is Grover Crisp, and I rue the day that Grover Crisp retires, because he is an incredible custodian of that film collection. He is the only man in the world that when I request movies to screen, he says, do you want that in 35mm or a digital DCP? It's the only studio that actually gives you that choice. And of course, I always say 35mm, and guess what? The 35mm are always in perfect, pristine condition. Because if they are not, Grover will actually requisition the funds to make sure that there is a beautiful, pristine 35mm print of the film. That's because the Columbia Pictures archive is not a huge archive, but it is an extremely valuable one. And he's able to maintain it in the way such things should be maintained. So I always give a tip of the hat, thank you very much, to Grover Crisp and the work he does at Sony Pictures Classics. And so we have these two beautiful 35mm prints to show you tonight. Okay. Now, those of you who've been coming from the beginning, and I know that's a lot of you because I'm seeing your loyal, dedicated faces at every single show, you know that we've been doing this in chronological order. And tonight, we are officially in the post-war era, because these movies come from 1946 and 47, respectively. And especially with the movie you're about to see, you're going to see something indicative of noir of this era, the plight of the returning war veteran. Okay, by the time Dead Reckoning was made, Humphrey Bogart had clearly established himself as one of the biggest movie stars in Hollywood. If you're young and you don't know the whole story of Humphrey Bogart and how he worked his way up from a second-tier player in the 1930s at Warner Brothers, kind of in the shadow of Edward G. Robinson and Jimmy Cagney, to becoming this iconic figure thanks to his playing anti-heroes like Mad Dog Roy Earl in High Sierra, Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon, and then romantic leading men like Rick Blaine in Casablanca. I have to say Humphrey Bogart was probably the most unlikely movie star imaginable. So much so that even the head of his own studio, Jack Warner, could not believe that the public liked him as much as they did and did not want to pay him what he was actually worth. And so Bogart, his entire career at Warner Brothers, was in this battle with his boss, saying, look at how much money you're making off of me. God damn it, pay me what I'm worth. They never quite settled that. So one of the things that's interesting about this film is not Warner Brothers, it's a Columbia picture, and Bogart was used as a chip because the studios very often would trade their actors around when they owed favors to each other, and so one Bogart paid off like 5 other actors, and so they loaned him to Columbia to make this picture. The expectation was that Bogart would be starring opposite Columbia's biggest female star, Rita Hayworth. It was Rita Hayworth who was originally supposed to be in this picture. But guess what? Orson Welles swiped her away from studio boss Harry Cohn and went off to make The Lady from Shanghai, which is a whole other epic story. And she was not available to make this movie. So Harry Cohn borrowed Elizabeth Scott from Paramount, where she was the exclusive property of producer Hal Wallace. She was very much his protege. He, in fact, created Elizabeth Scott in the mold of Lauren Bacall. Are you seeing how incestuous Hollywood was at that time, right? And they called Elizabeth Scott the Threat, because that was directly a reference to Lauren Bacall, who had skyrocketed to popularity with, of course, Humphrey Bogart. I digress for one moment. I interviewed Lauren Bacall one time, and I was waiting in the penthouse of St. Regis Hotel in New York to interview Lauren Bacall. This is what I fight against in what I do, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys love your old movies. But you know, she was notorious for having like the hottest temper, and she just did not suffer fools at all. And there was this young woman who worked for like People magazine or one of these entertainment rags, you know, and she's like looking at her BlackBerry and everything, and she looks up at one point. She's going to go in and interview Lauren Bacall in like 5 minutes, and she's doing her research a little late. And she says, she looks up at me across the room, and she says, "Wasn't she married to somebody famous?" To which I said, "You just ask her about that." I thought I was going to go in and interview Lauren Bacall and find just like blood splattered all over the walls, you know. Anyway, I digress. So Lauren Bacall is not in this movie. But this is really an example of filmmaking by committee. John Cromwell, the director of this film, is the director of this film because he was handpicked by Humphrey Bogart, because he was the director of the first theater production that Bogart ever appeared in. And because of this deal where he was being loaned to Columbia, he agreed to do it only if he had the right of refusal on the director. And it was John Cromwell that he agreed, "I'll make the picture with him." There are 5 screenwriters on this movie, and I challenge anyone in this audience to follow the incomprehensible plot of Dead Reckoning. But it has everything that is required of a film noir movie of this era. The returning war veteran, the hunt for the lost buddy, the femme fatale of dubious ethics. You don't know whether she really is the bad girl or not. There's gangsters who made their money while their soldiers were off fighting the war. The unusual thing about it is it's mostly set in Florida, which is rare for a film noir. And a lot of it was actually shot on location in St. Petersburg. It's work done by Steve Fisher, is the main screenwriter on the film, who was the author of our first night's film, I Wake Up Screaming. And it really is sort of a definitive noir, if you will. I leave you to your judgment as to how great the film is, but it is somewhat of a definitive noir. So, and I love the title. This is one of my favorite titles for a noir film, because those of you who know your military logistics know that it's a beautiful title for this movie, because Dead Reckoning is when you are sailing or flying a ship without instruments. You are literally flying blind and trying to land this thing or bring it into port with no instruments. And that's what Dead Reckoning is, and I find that a beautiful title for what Humphrey Bogart goes through in this movie. And I'll leave you with this. If you love Bogart, come to Key Largo and hang out with me in October, because I'm co-hosting the Humphrey Bogart Festival October 12th to the 16th in Warehouse, Key Largo, Florida, with Stephen Bogart, Bogart and Bacall's son, who puts that on every year and is nice enough to invite me to come down and do it with him. So, with that, I leave you with Dead Reckoning. Enjoy.